Second album landed a little flat, not just through the album itself, but like we were talking about, the pandemic hit, and so you weren't able to tour, and there were so many factors at play as to why the second album kind of, just scooted along under the radar. And when we came into the third one, we said we can't afford to have that happen again. We really need to step it up. What is it that we're going to try and achieve? And obviously, people love the first album, so we wanted to try and invoke the sensation that people were familiar with when they heard two for the first time, and that was in the sort of catchiness of the songs and the grooviness of the riffs and whatnot. But we want to show people that we're not, or they're not. Obviously, I wasn't in the band in that first album, but they're not teenagers anymore. Because we always joke online. We see so many comment sections going, "Yeah, these teenagers from New Zealand, like, hell, we've been teenagers for 8 years now."
What's up, everybody? It's Keefy from GhostCultMag.com. I am super stoked to be joined by two from Alien Weaponry. How are you doing today?
Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, as we said before. I'm doing pretty good. Just woke up. It's a nice early 8:30 a.m. for me here. So got straight out of bed, jumped on for the first interview of the day.
Amazing. Well, thank you for making the time and the effort. Time travel through media. I used to do all of these in person. And then, the plague happened. Didn't really hit your country too badly, your continent and your country too badly, but we got killed as horribly. And these all went over to Zoom. And I think Skype is now going out of business or getting folded into Microsoft. For those curious about social media, when I'm not doing Ghost Cult, I'm a social media expert. First and foremost, this new record, Te Ra, is incredible, and I'm super proud of y'all. I have followed the band from the very beginning, and I was lucky to be in attendance and help cover the very first tour of the States from the band, and
awesome.
Watch the band grow. And so this record, it's very cliche for a band to say, this is our best record. This is the most work we've ever done. This is just whatever our vision. But really, this is actually the best record from the band. I know that's going to shock
Thank
people.
You very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know that's going to surprise people because, the band has been so strong out of the gate for years. But I really think this is the deepest, best record. No skips, all killer, no filler, as we used to say in the 80s and 90s. So really good stuff.
Awesome. I mean, that's what we would have to agree as well. And like you said, I know everybody says that every time. They don't want to admit that the next body of work they're releasing isn't their favorite, but we really do think that there was so many changes to the structure of the writing process for Alien Weaponry with this third record that it was bound to go one of two ways. It was going to be such a shift that people were like, "What the heck? This is terrible." Or it was going to be the opposite and be like, "Wow, this is actually really great. This is exactly what we needed to move forward with the band and continue the trajectory of the band." And, it took us a little bit to admit the shortcomings of the second album over the past few years. And so when we went into the process of writing this third album, it was like, well, the first album was such a force onto the scene for the band. Second album landed a little flat, not just through the album itself, but like we were talking about, the pandemic hit, and so you weren't able to tour, and there were so many factors at play as to why the second album kind of, just scooted along under the radar. And when we came into the third one, we said we can't afford to have that happen again. We really need to step it up. What is it that we're going to try and achieve? And obviously, people love the first album, so we wanted to try and invoke the sensation that people were familiar with when they heard two for the first time, and that was in the sort of catchiness of the songs and the grooviness of the riffs and whatnot. But we also wanted to show that I'm the oldest, and I'm 25, and Henry's about to turn 25 in 1 week, and we want to show people that we're not, or they're not. Obviously, I wasn't in the band in that first album, but they're not teenagers anymore, because we always joke online. We see so many comment sections going, "Yeah, these teenagers from New Zealand, like, hell, we've been teenagers for 8 years now." But Lewis has been 16 for 8 years.
Yes. It's like The Simpsons. Bart is 8 forever.
Right. So one of the things we did like about the second album was the technicality improvements in our playing. So we wanted to show that we're not 16 anymore, we're 25. We've been playing our instruments for X amount of years longer, and Lewis has been honing his voice for X amount of years longer, and we wanted to show that we're now grown men with grown men's skills in songwriting and playing and whatnot. And to try find a fusion, so kind of fuse the technicality of the second album and the catchiness and whatever people loved about the first album. And I think we really, I do think we really achieved that. And like what you said, the sort of what was it? All hits, no skips or something. What
Yeah, yeah, all killer, no filler, no skips. That's
Killer,
right.
no filler.
Yeah,
That's great.
all killer, no filler, man.
And a big problem that we had with the second album, because a portion of it was recorded during the lockdowns, privately out here where the band is based, was there was no excess in the tracks. Every track that made it onto the second album was every demo they had prepared, there was no surplus to really be able to pick your best. So songs made it onto that album that the boys weren't exactly happy with by the release. This album, we had, I think, about 30 demos that we chopped into the 11 songs that we cut down to the 11 songs that made it on the record. So it was truly our absolute favorite of what we had. And so, yeah, I feel like we can safely say it is to the best of our abilities at the time, this is the best music you could have gotten out of us out of the past 3 years or however long we've been writing it.
Right on. Thank you for unpacking all that. And I do want to say, I think, yes, that you touched on a bunch of things that helped me out with my interview, but I think it's really important to, focus in on the songwriting because, yes, you are not kids forever. You grow, you tour the world, you play with other bands, you work on your craft, and you come back and apply what you learned to the next record. And no band is in like a cryogenic sleep in between albums. You're living life, which helps you get life experience for everything, not just your art, but whatever it is you do, your real life, your actual life outside of music affects your music. And so I'm sorry to hear the guys felt that way about the record. I love that record, but also it was brave to put it out. I think there was a lot of hard choices to make by labels at that time. Like, do we sit on this or do we put it out? And they had already been sitting on records for a long time. So in some cases, so I think, we needed music anyway. We needed new music. We needed, lizard brain journalists needed something to talk about. And, I really do feel like this record is very special and is going to really, put you guys where you need to be. And I do, I applaud the continuity, even with you coming in. I think there was, obviously, I think this is another important thing that we kind of skirted by, but I do think it's important. Fans end up gravitating to the first thing they hear from a band, right? The first thing, there were Metallica fans that loved Kill 'Em All in '83, and they hated Ride the Lightning. That seems crazy today for the biggest band ever, but like in metal, but people hated Ride the Lightning. They hated it. They hated Fade to Black. It's like, what? No, but that's what happens. So it's cool that the band, I think, as a journalist and a person that listens to a lot of music, I think it's important to keep changing and evolving and grow and be able to know yourself too. So I think that's important. A lot of bands are just kind of, shuffled into the studio with a producer that co-writes the record. You guys wrote your own record. Josh is incredible. We'll talk about Josh Wilbur in a second. His unbelievable resume and how great he is. But it's important to, be able to put your own stamp on things and get additionally. So I'm really proud of y'all.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, Josh, what is Josh brings to the table for this band? It's kind of like a fourth member.
Oh, I mean, so that was the sort of second major shift up of the process, because this was the first time we had recorded an album outside of New Zealand. And the first time that the boy's father wasn't involved. So he kind of co-produced the first one, but the second album was all done by Henry and Lewis's dad. And so this was the first time completely shifting that up and taking it out of country with a stranger, and when it came to Josh too, the funny thing was it was also really last minute that we chose Josh. We'd done interviews with a bunch of other producers and there was a bunch of names floating around of the the choices. And then it was this very last minute shift, like, oh, how would you fellas think about working with Josh Wilbur? And Lewis, being the Lamb of God fan that he is, was absolutely like, oh, if that can happen, that would be amazing, But we'd barely had any correspondence with him. We'd had 2 phone calls, I think, before we actually met him in person. And one of them was on tour and he was busy recording another record at the time. And so we were kind of like, I don't even know if we like get along. You know, we've had no opportunity to like really get to know each other before we're gonna about to jump into 5 weeks looking at each other every single day. You know, what if we what if we hate each other? And so we were sort of got we were excited as excited as we were nervous about it. And we'd just come straight off a headline tour in Europe. So we came off that tour, we went straight to LA, which I think ended up being a benefit because we were really locked into our playing and singing and stuff. You know, we'd been doing it for 6 weeks. Our voices were good. Our fingers were strong and all that stuff. And for Henry, his drumming was strong, and he had the endurance of being on tour. So actually, the timing ended up great. And then by day 2, it was like we'd known each other forever. We had this huge relief. It was like he's so easy to work with. So that was the first hurdle sort of over. And then I remember telling the boys, I said, I think though it would be silly for us to be unwelcoming of any criticism that someone like Josh brings. You know, I said, I know it might hurt a little bit if he tells you he doesn't like this song or doesn't like this riff or whatever. When you're working with someone of such a high caliber who's been doing this for many, many years, you know, that it would be sort of unwise, I think, to shelve any suggestions creatively from Josh. So we set him the boundaries. You know, the few boundaries, of course, was like the Māori stuff. From a lyrical perspective is not untouchable, but it's a little stricter than if he just wanted to chop and change some English lyrics kind of thing. And then, you know, things like the 3-piece harmonies that we do are always to be done during Māori songs. English songs, if you want to just multi-track Lewis's voice, which is what he ended up doing, more than happy to, but the Māori stuff has to be individual harmonies to sound like the group and all these sorts of things. So we set the few boundaries and then just let them go crazy, really. And it did not take long at all to see why Josh Wilbur is Josh Wilbur. You know, for example, you've heard the album, the first track, the opening track, Crown, was actually 2 demos that we didn't like. We didn't want them on the record, but they were there. Josh heard those 2 songs and went, you know what? We're going to take riff A, riff C from track A, and we're going to take riff B and riff D from track B, and then we're going to make a new riff and we're going to make a whole new song. And we were like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that. Why not? Trust the process. And we felt it good enough to be the first track on the whole album, you know, right off the bat, to hit them with a banger. So the whole process was really, really awesome to see. We learned a lot that we will now be applying to not only our songwriting, but the actual demo recording process from our home studios and everything the next time round we're already now like really excited for the next record because I know we would love to do it with Josh again, of course, but he taught us so much on how to sort of make songs great from a producer's perspective, and then little tips about recording and, you know, getting your tones and stuff. And one of the things he really enjoyed working with, he actually loved working with the Māori stuff too. As once it was a little tricky for him at the first, of course, because he was like, he's not able to workshop melodies as easier as he's used to because he can't quite pronounce the words or whatever. But to be fair, by the end of the 5 weeks, he was pretty locked in on it. You know, he started to get a feel for the language. One of the things that on this record I think that stands out the most is Lewis's vocals more than anything, and that's because Josh said this, and Lewis will probably be too humble to admit it, but Josh said Lewis is one of the best vocalists he's ever recorded, maybe the best vocalist he's ever recorded for a metal band. And the range that Lewis has at his disposal. Before metal, Josh was a pop hip hop producer, you know, so he was actually said he was able to apply some of the production knowledge he has from those genres to our music because Lewis can really sing. He's not just screaming or he's not just doing aggressive vocals. He has the capacity for melody. And so he was like, let's play with the melody, you know, let's get some catchy hooks going and all this stuff. And at first we were a little like, ooh, don't want to sound too poppy, you know. You get the middle elitist mindset kicks in, and then we were like, no, let's trust the process, you know. And Josh just had a field day, I think, with Lewis's vocal range and vocal capacity. So it was honestly such an awesome experience working with someone like Josh. And yeah, like I said, we would love to just do it again, you know. Like Lamb of God, I've worked with him for most of their career. I'm like, let's just lock in now. Third album, let's sell it right there. Josh the rest. Josh till we die.
Nice. That's a great point there. And I do think the vocals are particularly strong. Crown is an incredible banger to open the album. I'm going to make a good comparison that I think Lewis would like. I felt like the melodic stuff sounded a lot like, or reminded me of, a younger Brian Fair of Shadows Fall. So able to do hard vocals, metal and hardcore, but also carry beautiful melodies, really
Hmm.
sneaky melodies that stick in your ear. And of course, the whole band was very strong on the vocals and the record itself. I love, I love how you stuck to your guns. I think it's very important to know yourself as a band. I think, obviously one of the compelling things about the band is how entwined the indigenous music is with the metal, and I don't want that to ever change in the band or take a step back. And I love that it's on equal footing. In terms of at home, how is that received? Because I know, it's a different environment today politically than, let's say, before you were born, but still, just like we're facing here in this country, a rise of horrible ethics and feelings all over the world. And indigenous peoples of all walks, including here at our home, they need to be able to, be welcome and stand and be recognized and respected. So how's that work at home when they hear your music? How's that been received?
It's an interesting thing at the moment because I would say it's simultaneously the strongest I think our following in New Zealand has ever been, but then that also creates the strongest of the opposite reaction. Because New Zealand's always been a difficult market for us. I think a lot of people think that because we play overseas, it's because we're already big here, but it's actually the opposite. It's that we have, within perspective, a small following here. So the only way for us to play shows is actually by playing overseas. We're about to embark on a New Zealand tour in 2 weeks, and it's five shows. One's a festival, so six total. That's it. That's an entire New Zealand tour. That's all you get. And which is fine if you're our biggest band in the country who's selling out stadiums, but we're not. We're playing, small clubs and bars, and our big venues, of course, are in Auckland. And those are like normal sort of small arena shows. The tricky thing here is that metal is already a niche following. And then what we do find in New Zealand is that those who do like metal are more in favor of very extreme metal, which I wouldn't call us very extreme. So then a lot of them are like, those sissy radio rock. That's the kind of. And then one more step in that negative direction is we find to a lot of the people, I won't say a lot, but there is a chunk of the following of an already small market that are then also racist. You know what I mean? It's like the metal hard rock racism subgroup. So then you've already got a small market and you're cutting it again because they don't like what we do with the language, with the Māori stuff, keep politics out of music and blah blah blah, that all that stuff. What we are finding slowly, happening slowly again, but with which is on the positive end now, we're finding that a lot more Maori and Pacific Islanders and Polynesians from this country are coming to our shows because of what we do with the lyrics, not because of the music. So many of them come up to us after the show and go, "Gosh, I don't like that heavy music." It's like, but I like you guys because you've got the Maori thing going on, and we want to support a Maori group or a Maori, lyrics and content and message. And so they show up. A good example is we're playing a festival next in 2 weeks, and it's a multi-genre festival, but one of the only festivals in New Zealand that actually has a stage for heavy music, like a rock stage. But no, it's rock, electronic music like drum and bass and all that sort of stuff, and then it's hip hop, and then it's the reggae R&B. Like, so it's a really multi-genred stuff. But normally those genres, a lot of people are pretty interchangeable with them. And then it's the rock stage that is kind of those fans stay at that one stage all day. It's that, that kind of setup. We played it for the very first time last year. And it was the first time, I think, that people were complaining about scheduling between the rock stage and the R&B reggae stage, because there are a lot of Māori who normally, because R&B, reggae and hip hop are probably the biggest genres for Māori and Polynesians. There were a lot of Māori and Polynesians over on that side of the festival who wanted to come and watch us on the rock stage for half an hour, and they were actually on Facebook complaining about it. I can't believe you've put this big Māori artist next to alien weaponry and which was great. We thought that was really awesome, and the first time I imagine that people are complaining about those schedulings because they're not normally interchangeable crowds. So it's growing, and we're playing there again in 2 weeks, and we're curious to see what the turnout is again. And because we could see it from stage on that day, there was the fans, the rock fans and metal fans who'd been there all day in the front of stage, and we could see sort of along the fringes, these people who are kind of just poking their heads in to see what this band is that they've been hearing about that sing in Māori and do the haka and stuff like that. So it's really, really cool. I think at home it's slowly improving, slowly but surely. The market is just a lot smaller here and people don't realize it, and that's why we spend so much of our time overseas.
Right on. Thanks for sharing that. And again, I'm sorry for what you've gone through. We just spent a whole month here highlighting Black artists for a Black History Month here in America, which why is there even need to be a Black History Month? There needs to be one. And I cannot tell you how many racists come. Our co-owner is Black, is one of my best friends. And and he wrote he wrote a huge article and
Right.
highlighted a bunch of artists yesterday, today, tomorrow. And we shared on socials all month, every few days. And I cannot tell you how many horrible racist comments I had to fight and defend. And I just think it's the tenor of the world right now. The internet is making people feel very brave. They would never say shit to you in person or dare say some stuff in public. But
Yep.
I'm sorry that you've had to go through that. But on the other hand, look at the positive change you're affecting, sort of a subtle subversive activism. I really like that.
Yeah, and people are threatened by that pride, and that's what I think spurs it up. Is they're so used to the many years with the said group, whoever it is, Indigenous people, African American people, Maori, Pacific Islanders, were sitting quietly in the background, being the oppressed, so to speak. And now that people are finally speaking up, that the other side feel very threatened by that, so they're not used to this and they think it's a whatever attack on them or blah blah blah. I'm like, well, really it's just trying to get everyone back up to the same level. We all just want to be this, we just want to be people existing in the same world. It's not that hard, but they make it look very difficult.
Right. The reason why rights are rights and not, entitlements is literally the human part of human rights. It's
Right.
Everyone should have them, and it's not subjective.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing all that. I'm sure the record
Hey, no
label would
worries.
like me to talk about the album and the music also, but this is, I think, part of the alien weaponry story. Let's talk for a second about getting D. Randy Bly, land of a Lamb of God. Blah blah blah. It's first thing in the morning for me here. Sorry, I got the coffee right here. I gotta hit it.
Yeah.
Randy is on, I believe it's Tanewa. I hope I said that
Mhm.
right. A phenomenal performance, but also, again, his blend with the rest of the band is super cool.
Yeah, no, so that was a cool process for Taniwha. So for Maori, one of the only thing that's not phonetic about the Maori language is the WH sound, makes an F sound. Long story. But on Taniwha, when it came to Randy, it's no surprise to people who have listened to many an interview with Lewis is that Lamb of God and Randy and the team are his number one all time biggest influence. Favorite band, he always says that they gotten through some really tough times during high school and all that, and so that band means a lot to him. And I was listening to the demos probably, this is good over 2 years ago. The Randy thing came about surprisingly to a lot of people well before Josh was even in the picture, you know. So Josh had nothing to do with Randy's involvement. It just happened to work out very well that we ended up working with Josh. But I was listening to the demos, really early versions of the demos, yeah, over a year ago in my car. And one of the songs came on and I said, I feel like it needs something, What does it need? I was like, so we're not a guitar solo band because we're only a three-piece. So we do have the song with the guitar solo on it, but it's not something we make a habit of putting on the albums. So I was like, no, it's not really a guitar solo. It's got a great breakdown. Maybe the breakdown's a little long. Oh, maybe it needs a verse on it. So maybe it needs another verse. Okay. Well, maybe it should be Lewis. Oh, maybe it'd be kind of cool to get another voice on it, and well, who could it be? And going through all the bands that we've toured with and, maybe have the capacity to ask whether they'd want to be part of it. And, we just finished a tour with Knocked Loose and Gojira. And so maybe we were like Brian. Maybe we thought maybe Brian suited it. We also had come off the road with Employed to Serve and Gojira. And we were kind of like, oh, I wonder about Justine from Employed to Serve. We were thinking a very aggressive sounding verse that we don't normally do with our own vocals. And I was kind of sitting on it and I'd kind of shelved the idea. I hadn't even said anything to the boys about it. And then the documentary that we'd been filming or the band had been filming for many years and I'd been filming with them for 3 or 4 years. They showed us the first cut and they surprised us with the interview with Randy, and that Randy features quite heavily in the documentary. And so that made me realize that not only is he just there for a cameo interview, he knows enough about the band to comfortably speak about a lot of the band. You know, he's featured quite a lot in that documentary for people who have seen it. And then he followed us on Instagram, like individually. And I went, oh, this might be the opportunity, you know. And he'd actually sent me a message first, and he'd saw a video I make on my social media and was like, oh, I really like what you do with social media, and I saw this book that you recommended and I bought the book and I'm looking forward to sticking into the book, you know. So he opened up the conversation with that, and I was like, oh, you know, thanks, man, nice to meet you, whatever. And a couple of weeks later, but this all was happening sort of, I'd forgotten about the idea of having another vocalist, and then I was listening to the demos again and I went, Randy, let's do Randy. I was like, perfect. And then I said, I won't tell anybody though, because if he says no, then I don't have to, didn't get anybody's hopes up. But then if he says yes, that'll be an awesome surprise for the boys, but specifically for Lewis. So I flicked him a message. Hey man, we're in the middle of writing our new album and got the song I think you'd really like. You know, would you be interested? He said, yeah, man, I would love to. You know, if you send me the song and I feel like I'm an appropriate fit, I'd be more than happy to. I was like, great. Told the boys, and you imagine Lewis was like elated. He couldn't believe it. He was almost angry with me that he didn't that he even asked. He's like, oh gosh, how could you ask him that? What if he said no? You know, oh, you know, and I was like, that's why I didn't tell you. But then, you know, timing happens and scheduling happens. And yeah, over a year went by before we'd ever touch base with Randy again, you know. And within that time, we had decided that we were working with Josh Wilbur, you know. And so we were like, oh, this will be really easy now. We haven't talked to Randy in a year, but we definitely locked in now that we know it's with Josh. And so we told Josh, and he was like, oh, great. That's perfect, you know. He's like, that'll be easy as in I can record him, no problem. But the one thing that did happen was Josh changed the song. So he knew at the start of the recording that Randy was going to be on this song, and halfway through the recording, he was like, actually, I think we should put him on this song, which ended up being Taniwha. And originally the song that Randy was going to be on was like an all English song, but when he swapped it to Taniwha, Josh was like, one, Randy loves the history stuff, so he'd actually probably love to be on a Māori song. And that song hits hard. You know, we think it's a great song. And so Randy was awesome to work with too. We never saw him in person because he was at his home and he'd just come off tour. Because I did see him briefly at the end of the recording of our recording session. He was playing a show in LA with Mastodon and Kerry King. And I watched that show and caught up with him backstage, and we had a quick chat, you know, about his verse, and then because he was on tour, and then he was going to go home, and Josh was going to fly out to his home and record him at home. And Randy was amazing, man. He was like super keen to create a verse and a body of lyrics that sort of honored and respected the Māori element of what the song is about, the poetic and metaphorical element of the song and subject matter, and sort of karmic consequence. He wrote, I think, probably our favorite line, collectively our favorite line on the whole album, which was the "Now you'll die beneath the shadow of the long white cloud." We were like, that is such a bar. That's unbelievably good.
Fire bars by Randy.
Oh,
Fire.
it was crazy. It was such a good, for anyone that listening that doesn't get the reference, the Māori name for New Zealand is Aotearoa, which translates to the land of the long white cloud. So we were like, that is a amazing knowledge too of what it is that he's singing about, you know. So he knew that that's what the Māori name translates to, and so that makes for such an awesome line. And then he wanted to throw a few Māori words in there, so he said Taniwha, and then he said taiaha, which is the Māori staff weapon that we are sort of famous for. And so yeah, he loved it. We loved what he'd done to the verse, you know, and then he's you know, kept in contact, of course, and he's texted us a few times being like, man, I can't get that chorus out of my head, you know, it's such a great song, can't wait for everyone to hear it, and we hope people will love it. But we love that song. It was such a cool thing to have that work out honestly perfectly, you know. All the pieces fell into place so well for that collaboration to happen. It'd be awesome one day if we can perform it live for people with Randy, maybe a festival or something.
or maybe you guys will get to open for Lamb of God when they do a big headline tour again someday. I'm into it. And yeah, it's a highlight, but at the same time, the whole album around it is also very strong. It's not like, oh, we had a feature and that's the best thing. Like a lot of records, it sits in place perfectly with the rest of the record. Like I said, no skips.
Mm-hmm.
Last thing, because I want to give you back your morning and your other times, but thank you so much for all that stuff today. You unpacked this lovely. I would expect no less from Randy. Just now that you have a little break from tour before another round of touring, what's like the most important thing for you to do to decompress the next few weeks in between touring and the album drop?
Honestly, it probably sounds a little nuts, but it's play music, you know. On tour for me, I'm the bass player, but I am, as you can tell behind me, actually a guitar player. So when I go on tour, I spend 6 weeks and I never touch a guitar. And so when I come home, I want to play guitar. Um, and for me, like genre wise too, it's not like I'm not coming home and playing metal. You know, I'm a big country fan. I love bluesgrass and all this sort of stuff. So I come home and I play country music and sing and, get out of the heavy head banging mentality for a little bit. And I also am a huge fan of film. So film is like one of my passions, actually more so than music. You know, everyone goes, "Oh, did you listen to these new albums?" No, but I saw 1,000 movies last year or whatever, you know. So it's like I have a huge, deep passion for film. That's what I was doing before I joined the band. Was I was a design student studying for animation and visual effects. So I like to come home and, although I do manage to itch my film itch on tour, we get a lot of downtime. I get to put movies on the tour bus or whatever. But it always cycles between the two. It'll be playing guitar and not metal. And then sitting down and watching some movies with my parents. It's
Right on. Now I have to ask one last additional question, which is, what was your favorite movie of last year, and what is the movie you're looking forward to most this year?
favorite movie of last year, man. Last year was a stacked year for movies, but Dune Part Two, I think. For me, actually, it's the greatest. It has become the greatest sci-fi movie of all time. You know, and people find that controversial because there's so many greats from a nostalgic period that people like to hold on to. And I know nostalgia is the strongest pair of glasses there is. But I genuinely think that movie's a masterpiece. And I also like fun movies. I enjoyed Twist, that movie about tornadoes. Good time. But of course, I'm a country music fan too, so I was biased on the soundtrack and everything, you know. So that was a fun time. But no, there were some great movies, and they're coming out this year. Man, this year, funnily enough, I haven't really seen too much in the preambles that have got me as hyped as I was going into last year. But I believe the new Batman, or the sequel to the Batman, Robert Pattinson's Batman, I think is supposed to be dropping at some point this year. And
I believe it was moved to 27.
they've moved it
They
now.
don't
So
even have the
then,
script finished, so they're not going to start shooting until January, unfortunately. I'm sorry to break your
okay.
heart. I also am
Yeah, no, because I'm
looking
also
forward to
not
that.
great at I try not to watch trailers in that, because I think the trend for trailers right now has become ruins the movies a lot of the time, I think. They're designed now to build hype in a way that they drop all the important stuff in that minute and a half. So I try to stay away from those. So I'm less prepared for what's coming out. And as it drops, I go, "Oh yeah, let me go watch that. That looks like a good movie," you know?
Right on. Well, thanks for sharing. And of course, we're also looking forward to the wide release of the documentary that, was well lauded at the Tribeca Film Festival, which I used to go cover and had a whole history with myself. So it's, quite an honor, and screened at other places too. So I'm looking forward to the broader fan base getting to see this film, getting to hear this new record. Congratulations on everything. Tay
Yeah,
Rock
thank
comes
you.
out, March 28th on Napalm Records. They will kill me if I don't say it. And I will get a text message. And thank you so much, man. I'm so proud of you guys. Like I said, followed the band the whole way, been very closely following the band since you came in as well. And I do believe this is going to really open ears and eyes for you.
Hey, thank you very much, man. And yeah, we hope the same. We hope the same. We love it. We're very happy with it. And we hope our fans and followers feel the same. The response so far to the singles seems to reflect that sentimentality, you know. And I think there's actually, this is where labels like to be labels, you know, that there are some songs that we really love that aren't necessarily the single songs that we're really excited for people to dig their teeth into, you know. So there's some real gems on there that we're like, "Oh yeah." Everyone's like, "Oh, I love these songs." I'm like, "Oh, you just wait then. There's some real bangers on there that aren't the single radio ones, you know."
Right, Black and Sky. By the way, I'm just going to throw that out there. Black and Sky.
Hey.
Boy, oh, it's a ripper. Please send my best to the brothers. And once again, I hope to see you in person next time on the road, or one of our people will catch you somewhere in the world. Thanks so much for the time.
Hey, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, whatever.
Day.